Blood stained the December snow, bright and unforgiving against the moonlight. Deep in the treacherous peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains, a lone woman fought a losing battle against the freezing winds, her body curled fiercely around 9 tiny, mewling lives. Her alpha was miles away, unaware his legacy was freezing to death. Declan Ridge, alpha of the Silver Peak Pack, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Seattle penthouse, staring blindly at the relentless rain. To the human world, Declan was a ruthless real estate mogul, a man who had built a billion-dollar empire from the ground up. To the supernatural world, he was the Alpha King of the Pacific Northwest, a predator of unmatched strength. But right now, he was simply a ghost haunting his own life. It had been exactly 6 months since Vivian vanished. Vivian Hayes, his mate, his Luna. She had been on a routine visit to the eastern border near Spokane, driving her armored SUV through the mountain pass. The local authorities found the vehicle at the bottom of a 200-foot ravine, the metal twisted into an unrecognizable husk, the driver's side door ripped off its hinges. The interior had been painted with her blood, but her body was gone. The human police ruled it a tragic accident, theorizing she had been thrown into the churning rapids of the river below. The pack believed she had been ambushed by a rival faction. Declan had torn the mountains apart with his bare hands. He had led search parties for 60 days straight, refusing to sleep, refusing to eat, until his beta and lead enforcers physically dragged him back to the territory. The mating bond inside his chest had gone utterly silent, a dark, suffocating void that usually meant only one thing: death. "Declan, you need to sign these." The smooth, authoritative voice broke through his dark reverie. Declan didn't turn around as Arthur Harding, his chief financial officer and high-ranking pack elder, stepped into the office. Arthur was a man of impeccable tailoring and sharp, calculating eyes. He had been a mentor to Declan's late father and had seamlessly transitioned into advising Declan. "Leave them on the desk, Arthur," Declan rasped, his voice rough from disuse. "The pack is growing restless, Declan," Arthur pressed, stepping closer. The faint scent of expensive cologne and old parchment wafted off him. "It has been half a year. The neighboring packs are sensing our instability. A king without a Luna is a target. You need to accept that Vivian is gone. Genevieve Croft has been stepping up, handling the charity galas, managing the Omega wards. She comes from a strong bloodline. She would make an excellent—" "If you finish that sentence," Declan interrupted, his voice dropping to a low, lethal growl that rattled the glass panes. "I will rip your throat out and feed it to the feral hounds." Arthur paused, his jaw tightening. "I am only thinking of the pack's survival, Alpha." "Get out!" As the oak door clicked shut, Declan pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He couldn't explain the madness that gripped him. The bond was silent, yes, but deep in his marrow, something refused to let go. He felt a phantom ache, a bizarre, heavy, pulling sensation in his gut that had been growing stronger over the last 3 weeks. Suddenly, his office phone buzzed. It was the private, encrypted line used only by his elite guards. He snatched it up. "Speak." "Alpha," came the breathless voice of Liam, his lead enforcer. "We caught a rogue near the northern logging roads. He was trying to pawn something at a supernatural black market in Portland. You need to get down to the holding cells right now." "I don't deal with petty thieves, Liam. Handle it." "Declan," Liam said, using his first name, a severe breach of protocol that made Declan freeze. He was trying to sell the Moonstone locket. Vivian's locket. The world tilted on its axis. Within 20 minutes, Declan was deep in the subterranean levels of the pack's headquarters. The holding cell smelled of damp concrete, fear, and blood. Liam stood over a battered, terrified rogue whose hands were bound with silver-laced chains. On the metal table between them rested a heavy silver necklace, its center holding a flawless, glowing moonstone. Declan picked it up. His thumb brushed the clasp. It was Vivian's. He had secured it around her neck on the night they were mated. He moved so fast the human eye couldn't track it. In a fraction of a second, Declan had the rogue pinned against the concrete wall, his forearm crushing the man's windpipe. Declan's eyes had bled from their normal, stormy grey to a glowing, predatory gold. "Where did you get this?" Declan's voice was the sound of grinding tectonic plates. "I swear I didn't kill her," the rogue choked out, his legs kicking for purchase. "I found it! I just found it!" "Where?" "Up north, the Bitterroot Mountains, near the abandoned Black Creek logging camp. I was scavenging for supplies 3 days ago. I saw a woman. She was hiding in the old ice caves above the tree line." Declan loosened his grip slightly, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. "You saw her? What did she look like?" "Dark hair, blue eyes. She looked half dead. Alpha, I swear." The rogue gasped, coughing violently. "But I didn't go near her. I swear to the goddess I didn't." "Why not?" Liam demanded, stepping forward. "If she was half dead, a scavenger like you wouldn't just walk away from an easy target." The rogue shuddered, his eyes widening with genuine terror as he looked at Declan. "Because she wasn't alone. She was huge, Alpha, heavily pregnant, and there was a scent around that cave. Something dark, a death squad. Someone else was hunting her, and I didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. She dropped the necklace on the trail and I grabbed it and ran." "Pregnant?" The word struck Declan like a physical blow. The phantom ache in his gut, the strange pulling sensation. It wasn't madness. It was the biological tether of a father to his unborn pups. The mating bond to Vivian had been suppressed, masked by something incredibly powerful. But the blood tie to his children had been growing. If she was pregnant when she crashed, it had been 6 months. Werewolf pregnancies only lasted 3. She had been hiding for 6 months. "Liam," Declan commanded, dropping the rogue to the floor. "Mobilize the strike team. Ground the corporate jets. Prep the helicopters. We are going to the Bitterroots. Now." The blizzard was a monstrous, living thing. The helicopters could only get them within 10 miles of the Black Creek logging camp before the crosswinds threatened to tear the rotors apart. Declan, Liam, and 3 of their most lethal trackers dropped into the waist-deep snow, instantly shifting into their massive wolf forms. Declan's wolf was a nightmare of midnight black fur and golden eyes, standing nearly at the shoulder of a full-grown man. He led the pack, tearing through the snowdrifts with a desperate, frantic energy. The temperature was plunging well below 0. Humans would die out here in minutes. Even wolves would freeze if they stopped moving. "Hold on, Vivi. Please, goddess, hold on." They reached the abandoned logging camp by midnight. The wooden cabins were collapsed, buried under years of snow. Declan shifted back to his human form, ignoring the biting frost as he hastily pulled on tactical pants and a heavy parka from his pack. Liam and the others followed suit. "The wind is wiping out all scents," Liam shouted over the howling gale, sweeping a heavy flashlight across the white expanse. "The rogue said the ice caves above the tree line." Declan closed his eyes, forcing himself to bypass his physical senses and tap into the primal, spiritual bond. He ignored the cold. He ignored the wind. He reached into the dark void where Vivian's soul used to resonate against his. There. It was impossibly faint, like a single dying spark in an ocean of black water. But it was there, and surrounding it were tiny, fluttering pulses. Multiple pulses. "Up there!" Declan roared, pointing toward a jagged limestone ridge that cut into the sky. The climb was brutal. Ice sliced their hands, and the sheer altitude robbed them of oxygen. As they crested the ridge, the storm seemed to scream in protest. Tucked beneath a massive overhang of rock, a dark fissure opened into the side of the mountain. Declan was the first inside. The sudden absence of the wind was jarring, replaced by the eerie, hollow silence of the cavern. He clicked on his tactical flashlight. The beam cut through the freezing darkness, illuminating a scene that would haunt Declan Ridge for the rest of his immortal life. The smell hit him first. Copper, raw meat, amniotic fluid, and the sharp, sour tang of adrenaline and frost. Near the entrance of the cave lay the massive, shredded carcass of a mountain lion. Its throat had been entirely ripped out, the blood frozen solid into red ice across the stone floor. Deeper inside, huddled against the farthest wall of the cave, was a shape. "Vivian," Declan breathed, his flashlight trembling. He ran toward her, falling to his knees on the freezing stone. She was in her human form, but she was unrecognizable. Her once glowing skin was a terrifying translucent grey, marred by frostbite and deep, jagged claw marks from the mountain lion. She was emaciated, her cheekbones jutting out sharply, but it was what she was holding that made Declan's breath completely leave his lungs. Curled against her bare chest, tucked under a makeshift nest of her torn, bloody coat and the fur she had somehow skinned from the dead predator, were the pups. They were impossibly small, blind, and covered in fine, downy hair. They were squirming weakly, letting out tiny, high-pitched mews. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 pups. An impossibly massive litter. A biological miracle that would have killed even a healthy, fully supported Luna in a sterile hospital ward. Vivian had birthed them here, on the freezing stone, fighting off a mountain lion in the middle of labor. She had wrapped them in her own clothes, pressing her naked skin against them to share her fading body heat. She had kept herself awake, bleeding and freezing, knowing that if she closed her eyes, her babies would die. "Vivi," Declan choked out, tears finally breaking free, freezing instantly on his cheeks. He frantically unzipped his heavy parka, wrapping it around her and the pups, pulling her freezing body against his chest. "I'm here. I've got you. Oh, goddess, I've got you." Vivian's eyelashes fluttered. Her lips were blue, cracked and bleeding. Her eyes, usually a vibrant, sparkling blue, were dull and glassy. It took her a moment to focus on his face. "Declan?" she whispered, her voice sounding like dry leaves scraping over stone. "Yes, my love. It's me. I'm taking you home. You're safe now." Liam and the trackers had rushed in, immediately stripping off their own thermal layers to build a protective barrier around the mother and the 9 pups, activating emergency thermal blankets. "No." Vivian weakly gripped the front of Declan's shirt. Her fingers were like ice, but her grip was desperate. "No. Don't take them back. Not safe. He found us." "Who?" Declan asked, brushing her matted, blood-soaked hair from her forehead. "Who found you, Vivi? Who did this to you?" "The crash wasn't an accident," she wheezed, her body shivering so violently it shook the pups. "Wolfsbane, in the air vents. I shifted, ran, kept moving so they couldn't track my scent, hid the pregnancy." "Who put the wolfsbane in the car, Vivian?" Declan's voice was remarkably gentle, though a murderous rage was igniting a roaring fire in his blood. Vivian looked up at him, a tear slipping down her frost-bitten cheek. "Arthur. It was Arthur. He wanted Genevieve to be Luna, to control you." She took one shuddering breath, her eyes rolling back as her head fell limply against Declan's chest. The faint spark of her life force through the mating bond flickered, threatening to go out entirely. "Medic!" Declan roared, the sound echoing off the cave walls like a clap of thunder. "Get the emergency beacons off! Now! Nobody dies tonight! Hold her steady! The IV fluid is crystallizing in the tube!" Liam bellowed over the deafening shriek of the blizzard outside. His massive, calloused hands worked frantically, rubbing desperately needed friction into Vivian's frost-blackened arms. Inside the cavern, the air was a chaotic whirlwind of tactical precision and primal panic. Enforcer Jackson had stripped entirely to his waist, securing 3 of the impossibly small, fragile pups against his bare, burning chest. He wrapped them tightly in his heavily insulated thermal jacket, turning his own body into a living incubator. The other trackers instantly mirrored his actions, dividing the remaining newborns among themselves. Declan held Vivian, refusing to let anyone else touch her. He channeled every ounce of his alpha aura, pushing his own regenerative energy through their dormant mating bond, trying to force her failing heart to keep beating. "Alpha!" a voice crackled through Liam's encrypted earpiece. It was Wyatt, their lead pilot. "I've got the Sikorsky UH-60 hovering directly over the ridge. The crosswinds are hitting 40 knots and climbing. If we don't winch you up in the next 3 minutes, the rotors are going to ice over, and we all drop into the ravine." "Drop the cables!" Declan roared into the comms. The extraction was a terrifying blur of freezing agony and deafening noise. Heavy steel winch cables lowered from the belly of the blacked-out military helicopter, whipping wildly in the tempest. Declan strapped Vivian to his chest in a tactical harness, shielding her battered body with his own bulk as they were violently yanked into the sky. The trackers followed suit, fiercely guarding their precious cargo. The moment the heavy steel doors of the Sikorsky slammed shut, the interior of the cabin transformed into a makeshift trauma ward. Heat blasted from the overhead vents. Declan laid Vivian gently on the steel floor, ignoring the blood soaking through his own tactical gear. "Call Dr. Harrison Sterling," Declan ordered Liam, his voice dropping to a lethal, terrifying calm. "Tell him to lock down the subterranean supernatural wing at Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. I want pediatric incubators, massive blood transfusions, and the top Lycan surgeons scrubbed in and waiting on the helipad. If a single human doctor sees us, wipe their memory. Clear the city's airspace." "Already done, Alpha," Liam replied, his eyes fixed on the tiny, squirming bundles in his jacket. "Declan, they're strong. I can feel their wolves already. They are fighting." Declan looked down at Vivian's pale, lifeless face, pressing his forehead against hers. "You hear that, Vivi? They are fighting. Don't you dare leave me after surviving all of this." The flight back to Seattle was an agonizing test of endurance. When the helicopter finally touched down on the illuminated roof of Harborview Medical Center, a swarm of medical personnel in dark scrubs descended upon them. Dr. Harrison Sterling, a distinguished pack elder and the foremost expert in lichen biology on the West Coast, took one look at Vivian and the 9 pups and went entirely pale. "By the goddess!" Harrison breathed, immediately barking orders as orderlies rushed stretchers forward. "Get her on a high-flow thermal bypass. The pups need immediate neonatal intensive care. Alpha, you cannot follow us into surgery. She is severely depleted. 9 pups. They've been cannibalizing her wolf's regenerative cells just to survive the gestation. We have to operate now." Declan stopped at the swinging doors of the surgical wing, his boots leaving bloody footprints on the pristine white linoleum. He watched them wheel his mate and his children away. He stood there for a long time. Slowly, the terror that had gripped him for 6 months crystallized into something cold, sharp, and infinitely dangerous. The sorrow was gone. Only the Alpha King remained. "Liam," Declan said quietly, not turning around. "I'm here, Alpha," Liam replied from the shadows. "Have Jackson secure this floor. Nobody enters or leaves. Where is Arthur Harding?" He called an emergency board meeting at the Ridge Enterprise Tower for 8 a.m. today. He's planning to officially declare you mentally unfit to lead, using the PAC's plummeting financial portfolios as leverage to install Genevieve Croft as acting Luna and himself as regent. Declan checked the heavy Rolex on his wrist. It was 7:15 a.m. Perfect. 45 minutes later, the executive boardroom on the 80th floor of Ridge Enterprise Tower was thick with the scent of expensive espresso, nervous sweat, and unchecked ambition. Arthur Harding stood at the head of the massive mahogany table, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit. Beside him sat Genevieve Croft, playing the part of the somber, reluctant leader in a black designer dress. The room was packed with regional alphas, pack elders, and corporate shareholders. It is with a heavy heart, Arthur projected, his voice a masterclass in fake sorrow, that we must address the deteriorating mental state of Alpha Declan. For 6 months, our borders have been vulnerable. For the survival of the Silver Peak Pack, we must vote to enact the Regency Protocol. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom didn't just open, they were violently kicked off their hinges, sending a shower of splintered wood across the plush carpet. The room erupted in gasps as alphas leaped to their feet. Declan Ridge walked in. He was still wearing his tactical gear, his shirt torn and heavily stained with dried blood. He smelled of death, ice, and unbridled power. His alpha aura slammed into the room like a physical shockwave, forcing 3 of the lesser alphas to immediately drop to their knees, gasping for air. "Sit down," Declan commanded. The room obeyed instantly. Arthur's polished veneer cracked. "Declan, you're covered in blood. We were just—" "I know exactly what you were doing, Arthur," Declan interrupted softly, slowly walking down the length of the table. "You were trying to steal my throne while I was retrieving my family." Genevieve stood up, feigning confusion. "Family? Declan, Vivian is gone." "Say her name again, Genevieve, and I will rip your throat out," Declan promised, his glowing golden eyes locked entirely on Arthur. Declan reached the head of the table and slammed a thick manila folder onto the mahogany. "I had my intelligence team rip into your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. You got sloppy, Arthur. $2 million wired to a rogue mercenary outfit called the Blood Iron Syndicate, exactly 1 week before my mate's car was run off the road." Murmurs of shock rippled through the elders. Arthur took a step back, the scent of his terror suddenly overpowering to the room. "It's a fabrication," Arthur stammered. "He's lost his mind." "My mate was found last night," Declan announced, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Alive, hiding in a freezing cave in the Bitterroots. She survived the wolfsbane you put in her ventilation system. She survived the crash, and she survived giving birth on the bare stone." Declan leaned in close. "To 9 pups." The boardroom descended into absolute, stunned silence. 9 pups. A blessing from the moon goddess herself. Attempting to murder a pregnant Luna, attempting to assassinate 9 royal heirs, Declan whispered. Arthur shifted instantly, his clothes tearing apart, as a massive, grey-furred wolf erupted in the boardroom, lunging for the shattered door. Declan was faster, his arm extended, his hand transforming into a massive clawed paw that slammed Arthur's wolf form to the floor, crushing his spine against the carpet. Arthur whimpered, completely pinned. "Genevieve," Declan said, his claws digging deeper into Arthur's back. Genevieve trembled violently against the wall. "I didn't know about the assassination, I swear." "You are banished," Declan declared. "If you are found within 500 miles of my territory, you will be hunted. Leave." Genevieve scrambled over the broken doors and fled. Declan looked down at the whimpering grey wolf. "Let this be the only warning I ever give." With a sickening crunch that echoed through the silent room, the Alpha King executed the traitor. He stood up, wiping the blood from his hands with a linen napkin. "The meeting is adjourned," Declan said calmly. "I need to get back to my wife." For 3 weeks, the subterranean wing of Harborview Medical Center was transformed into an impenetrable fortress. Enforcers guarded every entrance, the stairwells and the elevator shafts. Inside, The sterile white walls of the VIP recovery suite felt a world away from the snowy hell of the Bitterroots. Declan sat in a plush armchair beside the hospital bed, his elbows resting on his knees, his chin propped on his hands. He hadn't left the room. He managed his billion-dollar empire from a secure tablet, signing multi-million-dollar contracts with one hand while keeping his other hand firmly wrapped around Vivian's. "You're staring at me again, Alpha," Vivian murmured, her voice still raspy, but the colour had finally returned to her cheeks. The extensive frostbite had been healed by the combination of top-tier medical care and her wolf's accelerated regeneration, though a few faint, silvery scars remained on her arms, badges of her unimaginable survival. Declan smiled, a genuine, soft expression that the corporate world never saw. He brought her knuckles to his lips, pressing a kiss to her skin. "I'm making sure you're real. Every time you close your eyes, I'm terrified I'm going to wake up back in that empty penthouse." Vivian shifted, wincing slightly as her healing muscles protested, and reached out to cup his jaw. Her thumb traced the dark circles under his eyes. "I'm real, Declan. I'm here. I fought too hard to let some mountain lion and a corrupt elder keep me away from you." The mating bond between them, once a silent, agonizing void, was now a roaring fireplace of warmth and light. Declan could feel her emotions as clearly as his own: exhaustion, relief, and an overwhelming, fierce love. "Speaking of fighting," Dr. Harrison Sterling said, as he pushed open the door, holding a thick medical chart. The elder doctor had a warm smile on his face, though he looked almost as exhausted as Declan. "I think it's time for the Queen to see her army." Vivian gasped, trying to sit up completely, her eyes wide with desperate anticipation. "They're out of the incubators. Are they breathing on their own? Harrison, please tell me." "Peace, Luna." Harrison chuckled warmly, holding up his hands. "They are perfectly healthy. In fact, their growth rate is terrifying. They inherited their father's absurd constitution and their mother's sheer willpower. Nurse Clara, bring them in." The double doors swung wide. A specialized, custom-built, oversized medical crib was wheeled into the room by 3 grinning nurses. Declan stood up, helping Vivian swing her legs over the edge of the bed. He supported her waist as they walked over to the crib. There they were. 9 perfect, squirming miracles. They had grown significantly in 3 weeks. Their eyes were open, revealing a mix of stormy greys and vibrant, striking blues. "Look at them," Vivian breathed, tears streaming down her face as she reached in, gently tracing the cheek of a tiny boy with a mop of raven hair. "Goddess, Declan, look at what we made." "You made them, Vivi," Declan said softly, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You kept them alive. You are the strongest creature I have ever known." They spent the next hour simply watching them. There were 5 boys and 4 girls. The eldest boy, who was already significantly larger than the others and fiercely protective, constantly wedging himself between his siblings, was named Ronan. The smallest girl, who had inherited her mother's bright blue eyes and a surprisingly loud, demanding howl, was named Lyra. "The pack is calling them the 9 Pillars," Declan murmured, watching Ronan playfully chew on Lyra's ear. "Word has spread across the continent. With Arthur gone and the elders in line, there isn't a single pack in North America that will dare challenge our borders now. They know the Silver Peak bloodline is untouchable." Vivian leaned her head back against Declan's chest, feeling the steady, reassuring thrum of his heartbeat. "I don't care about the politics, Declan. I don't care about the borders right now. I just want to take them home." "We will," Declan promised, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. "Tomorrow. I've had the penthouse completely renovated. An entire floor is just a nursery, and I've doubled the perimeter security. Nobody will ever touch you again." Vivian turned slightly in his arms, wrapping her arms around his neck. She looked deeply into his golden eyes, seeing the fierce, unwavering devotion that had driven him through the darkest 6 months of his life. I know, Declan. I'm not afraid anymore. The next morning, the Alpha King and his Luna walked out of the hospital, stepping into the brisk grey morning of Seattle. Flanked by a heavily armed escort of elite enforcers, Declan carried 2 custom carriers, while Vivian proudly carried a third, refusing to let the nurses help her. As they stepped into the waiting convoy of black SUVs, the rain finally stopped, and a rare beam of sunlight broke through the Pacific Northwest clouds, illuminating the path ahead. The Bitterroot Mountains had tried to claim his world, but they had fundamentally underestimated a mother's primal endurance. Declan stood by the nursery glass, his arm securely around Vivian's waist, watching their 9 miracles breathe in unison. The Alpha King had his Luna back, stronger than before, and the Silver Peak Pack would reign unchallenged for generations. They were no longer just survivors. They were an unbreakable legacy.